All right, welcome back to week 11 of the DSR channel, and we're going over the controller role. This is going to be part one. I'm going to get through all the part ones of all the role videos, and then I'll come back and fill in things and get to the later parts. All right, and this is all the roles, okay? So as a reminder, a role is not what is needed in the party, right? A role is just what you've decided, the fantasy you want to live with this character you've made, the way you want to play this character. So you're in the role because you chose to play this character that way, okay? There is no ideal party composition, and frankly, you shouldn't try to force that. You know, nobody should be trying to force that on any party, but you should talk about it as a group, right? Make sure that everybody's aware of what everybody's planning to play. And you should all talk about how's that going to work together, right? If every one of you is ranged and there's no frontliners, then you guys need to talk about a plan for how to like keep away from the enemies, right? If everybody's a healer, then you got to figure out a plan for how you're going to like deal damage to the enemies. Okay, so yeah, you just need to talk about it, make sure you have a plan. And a lot of the times, like at least half of the group is willing to totally change, right? So if you got a few people who are just really excited about a certain role, the other half are probably like, yeah, I'm totally happy to change. So that usually works out, just as long as you talk about it, right? That's the point of this. You need to talk about it, make sure everybody's on the same page. Okay, so we're talking about the controller. Your primary thing you are doing in combat is impeding enemy actions and movement, right? Ideally, taking away their movement completely and their actions completely, okay? The rest of it's very similar to all the other non-frontliners, right? You want to stay away from melee, you want to avoid being targeted, and the last column, remember, this is not the classes that are the best at this role. This is not the classes that are good at this role. This is not the classes you should play if you want to play this role. This is merely the stereotypes. Okay, this is like the default stereotypes of this role. So this is just giving you examples of classes that are good in this role. You can be good at any class can be good at this, if especially with a little multi-classing. Okay, so the bard, druid, sorcerer, warlock, and wizard are all good examples of controllers. That is not exclusive nor an exhaustive list. Okay. And here's the overall ranking of how I would rank every class across all 10 roles. And this is only tier one of play. So we're talking specifically level 4 only, and no subclass, no background, no species, no feats at all are involved. So this is just your starting point, okay? This is not your maximum potential, right? With feats and backgrounds and species and subclasses added in, you can really change how you rank at a certain thing. So like Artificer is a good example, right? Artificer is a D as a tank as a base class, but if you choose the armor or subclass, it's an A. Okay, so this is just your starting point. This is like where you're going to start building on to create the character. And real quick, like I have this trend on my videos where I have a lot more comments than likes. It's like in some cases twice as many comments as likes. So I love the community interaction. Please keep it up, but also help a nerdy nerd out. You know, a fellow nerd. I need some likes too. I think for the algorithm. I don't really know how it works, but I think that helps. Look, even Otto seems confused here. So if you could help me out, I'd really appreciate it. All right, let's get into some of the basics here. Okay, first up, you are trying to impede enemy actions and movement, right? That is the whole point of being the controller. Now, remember, just because you're trying to play the controller doesn't mean that's the only thing you should try to be good at. I'm just talking about if you want to be a good controller, these are the things you do. You should always diversify your build, okay? All right, so first up, a range of 30 feet. Yeah, you want control spells that at least have a range of 30 feet. If you got to get any closer, then you're too close to melee and could get in trouble. And if you haven't built to be able to stand on the front line for your controller, then that's a real problem. All right. Second, impose the incapacitated condition or remove their actions entirely. That's kind of the main things you're going for. So something that incapacitates them, which takes away all their actions, or something that just removes their actions. There are a few of those that just don't allow them to take actions or inhibits their actions strongly without imposing the incapacitated condition. Now, there are other conditions that also cause incapacitated, like the stun condition, the paralyzed condition, or death. So keep in mind that death is the strongest condition you can impose on your enemies. Okay. Then you want to reduce, additionally, if you can, you want to reduce their movement enough so that melee monsters can't reach your allies. Okay. If you can do that, that's great. And if they don't have any ranged attacks, that's great. A lot of times their monsters' ranged attacks are weaker than their melee attacks too. Not always. That was a lot more true, a lot more often in 2014. But with the 2024 monster redesign, they've started to balance that. And I would still say their melee attacks are still more frequently a little stronger than their ranged. or they have more capabilities at melee, but it's not nearly as pronounced as it used to be. Like it's just slightly more common that their melee abilities are stronger, and they sometimes slightly more often that they do a little more damage in melee. Anyway, it's no longer nearly as strong, but there are still a few monsters that don't have any range attacks at all. So this is still worthwhile. Lock them down, especially since even if they have range attacks, if you lock them down, and they can't move. It's a lot easier for your backliners, which you're probably one of, right? To move behind targets, and they can't just move to try to get line of sight on you. Sorry, move behind walls and obstructions, and they can't get line of sight on you. Then they can't target you with their range attacks either. And finally, you still want to avoid friendly fire, right? You do not want to be hitting your allies with these control effects. So some of them are okay. Like if it's just movement impediment and your frontliners are already at the front line with the enemies, then they don't care if you slow down their movement along with the enemies. That's fine. But anything else, you don't really want to be imposing on your allies, at least not without their permission, right? There's definitely those like great moments, especially that can be driven by role play, where you got a frontliner who's like, yeah, just hit me with it, I can take it. And those are great moments. So as long as everybody's on board, it's okay. Just don't do it without discussing it, making sure that they're on board for this thing too. Okay, all right. The ideal spells. Okay, these are like your A tier spells. These are always good, always solid picks. Now, none of the classes have access to all of these except the Bard at level 10. The Bard at level 10 can literally get all of these. You don't want all of these, but you can cherry pick all the very best of each of these, okay, as a Bard after level 10. But before level 10, nobody has access to all these. The Wizard has almost all of them. They're only missing like 3 of these. 2, 3. So the Wizard does the best overall, next to the Bard after 10th level. But yeah, these are the ideal spells to get, okay? And you're not necessarily going to be a bad controller if you don't have these. But if you want to be a good controller, like an A tier controller for your party, you want to be able to get several of these, a mix of these, okay? So, all right, let's go over some of the details. And I'm not going to bring up the spell description for every single spell. That would make this video way too long. And my videos are already too long. So I'm going to go over and bring up the kind of overview like I did for the blaster spells. Okay, here we go. Here's the list of every spell in the game, control spell in the game that I would rank as an A tier control spell. And I did go off camera because there just isn't enough screen real estate here. Okay, and this is overwhelming to look at, and I wrote this up, so I'm sure it's even harder for you, especially on like the small screen. So let's break this up a chunk at a time and go through it. Okay. Okay, let's go over the first through third level concentration spells first. And the reason I'm breaking it by concentration and then other spells is you can only concentrate on one spell, right? And they tend to be your strongest control spells or strongest spells in general as concentration because it takes your concentration and you only get one. So what you'd really typically do is, start the combat with a big control spell, maintain that, and then on your subsequent rounds, you're gonna want to use one of these non-control spells or deal damage in some way. Okay, sorry, you'll want to use one of these non-concentration control spells or deal damage, right? That's what you're going to do the rest of the combat. And then you just maintain your big concentration control effect throughout. All right, so first through third level concentration spells starts off with Tasha's Hideous Laughter at level 1, which I'm going to put a little asterisk on there right at levels 1 and 2, maybe even 3 and 4. Sleep is probably better than Tasha's Hideous Laughter, because Tasha's Hideous Laughter only targets one creature per spell slot level that you use. So if you upcast it at 2, it'll target 2 now, but Sleep has a 5-foot radius, and it's pretty easy to get 2 people in that. Now, there's some nuances there. Like the Sleep spell, if the creature is immune to the exhaustion condition, then they're immune to the Sleep spell. Tasha's Hideous Laughter has nothing like that, right? It's not using the charm condition. It's not using the frighten condition. It has no restrictions at all. It just works equally well on literally anything, even if they're a slime. They could be an ooze. They could be a dragon. It could be anything. As long as they fail a saving throw, it works. So right at levels 1 through 4, Sleep is probably better. Once you get higher level and have higher level spell slots, Tasha's Hideous Laughter is better because it doesn't have friendly fire. Like Sleep will have friendly fire, so if you get your allies in there, it could affect them. But also, you can just target anyone within range, right? They could be 30 feet that way and 30 feet that way, and you can just hit the targets you want to hit. And after a certain point, there'll be more monsters the higher level you go usually in one combat, but it kind of tops out at like 5 or 6, right? Like you don't often have like just 20 monsters in a fight. Like it happens, but not very often. So a lot of times, Tasha's Hideous Laughter, if you just upcast it, will get everything you need, and it locks them down, and is a good spell. All right, next at second level, we have Suggestion. That only targets one creature, but if it lands on them and you give them the right kind of suggested course of action, it locks them down for 8 hours. Especially if that's like the captain of the fight, right? That's like the enemy's, the enemy team's captain. If he has some sort of influence over the other enemies, and you tell him to not only leave but tell him to take his minions with him, some of them may leave with him. That's DM prerogative, DM roleplay, but should it can work. So Suggestion is good. It relies on the charmed condition. So if they're immune to charm, or resistant to charm, Suggestion doesn't work as well. All right. Then also at second level, we got the Web spell, which is fantastic. Okay, it causes difficult terrain. It causes light obscurement. I didn't put that on there because it's the lesser effect, and I just needed the space to fit everything on there. So, but the real important part is difficult terrain. Even if they save against it, and if they start their turn in it, every time they start their turn in it, they have to roll a deck save or become restrained, and the restrained condition is very strong. So the Web spell is quite good. The only way they can break out of if they get restrained is they have to spend an action to try to break out with an athletics check, which is now strength. And that's combining both, they had to make a deck save and a strength save. So it's more likely that they're bad at one of those. Okay. So yeah, Web is good. Probably the biggest downside is if it doesn't have anchors. If you don't have walls or trees or something to anchor it on both sides, it collapses to the ground, and it's no longer a cube-sized effect. 20-foot cube. It's now like a 5 feet deep, but then 20 feet square. So, but if you're on a battlefield and nothing can fly anyway, that doesn't matter. So it's still a 5-foot effect, causing all the problems for the enemies. And it can still be quite effective even at high levels. Now, you don't upcast it because it doesn't have any upcast effect, but when you're high levels, just locking down enemies with web is still an effective thing to do, especially if they don't have like a ranged attack. All right, and that's the end of second level spells. So now we're moving into third level spells, and we've got Fear, Hypnotic Pattern, and Insight Greed. I'm going to talk about all three of those kind of together. So Hypnotic Pattern and Insight Greed both work off of the charm condition. So if the enemies are resistant to charm or immune to charm, you do not want to be using those. Both of those break. You see, I've got a column there for break. That means that you can break the effect by damaging them, or they have some way to break out of it. In this case, both of those are immediately broken when they take any damage. So both Hypnotic Pattern and Insight Greed immediately broken. Hypnotic Pattern has one additional weakness in that the enemy's allies can just snap them out of it with an action. So they don't even have to deal them damage. They can just spend their action to wake them up. And you've now, at least that one enemy had to waste their action or spend their action to do it. But it is pretty easy for them to break out of Hypnotic Pattern, especially if you only if half the enemies save against your Hypnotic Pattern, then the other half just wakes up the first half. And yeah, I guess they all, half of them lost one round, and that's it. So Hypnotic Pattern isn't as good as I think a lot of people say it is. Like it's good. It's just not S tier or anything like that. It's just pretty good. Now, if the DM never remembers to have the enemies wake each other up, then it's better. Insight Greed is kind of a sneaky good one. It's an expanded content from Acquisitions Incorporated. It's a lot like Hypnotic Pattern, except that it doesn't have an area. It's just everybody you choose. Like every enemy within range, which is 30 feet. So as long as they're within 30 feet of you, you can target every enemy. There's no friendly fire. You do have to concentrate on it. It's a wisdom save, so very similar to Hypnotic Pattern, and it uses the charm condition. But if they fail, then they spend their turns just walking towards you and doing nothing else on their turn. And once they arrive at you, they just stand there staring at the gem you're holding in your hand, and they waste all their turns. So it's actually a really good control effect. In some ways, better than Hypnotic Pattern because it has no friendly fire. Like even if your allies and the enemies are all kind of intermixed, you can just target exactly the enemies. It's not an area like Hypnotic Pattern. So in a lot of ways, I think Insight Greed is better than Hypnotic Pattern. But it's also easily broken. Any damage and it ends. Same thing with Tasha's Hideous Laughter, which I forgot to mention. And then you have the Fear spell. So the Fear spell causes the Frightened condition, but not just the Frightened condition. It has additional rider effects where it means where if they fail to save and are frightened, they now have to run away. So they have to spend their turn running away, which means take the dash action, and that's all you can do. They also drop what they were holding before they start running. So it's got additional riders there. The downside of that is that it's the frightened condition. So if the enemy's immune to the frightened condition, this is pointless. The other downside is it's a cone, and it does have friendly fire, so it's going to be harder to place if you don't go first in combat, right? This is where the controller can really benefit from winning initiative. Like you might want the alert feat, you might want the lucky feat just so you roll with advantage and have the alert bonus to your initiative. Uh, Maybe you just want the alert feat so that if somebody else beats you, like somebody else wins and goes first, you can switch with them to drop your big control effect right at the beginning. Yeah, that's kind of the problems with the fear spell. All right, and that's and then we got one last one for third level. That's the slow spell. So the slow spell doesn't require any condition. Okay, it doesn't require them to not be immune to a condition, right? So there's no condition there, which means it can just work on anything. It doesn't completely take away their actions, but it reduces their movement by half. It reduces the number of attacks to 1. It gives them a penalty on their AC. It causes a 25% chance of spellcasting failure. Like it's a pretty crippling effect that you impose on them. Now they can still kind of technically take actions, but they are so crippled. It's a massive effect on the battlefield, and it also has no friendly fire. It's just 6 targets. Now they all have to be within I think a 20-foot cube. I had to take that off to get some more space. Uh, it's a 20-foot cube, but you just pick 6 creatures, so no friendly fire. So slow is still a great one to use, especially since it can block spell casting. So don't just pass that one up because it doesn't lock them down with like an incapacitated condition, right? If they're immune to frightened and charmed, slow is way better than hypnotic pattern, fear, and insight greed. All right, 4th through 6th level concentration spells. First up, confusion. So confusion has like an 80% chance of basically taking their turn away. Okay, so it's not quite as good as landing like a fear or hypnotic pattern or insight greed, where it basically takes their whole turn away. The benefit upside is that it doesn't rely on the charmed or frightened conditions. It can also has a 20% chance to cause them to attack each other or just the nearest creature. So if you hit a bunch of enemies with this and they're all bunched up, they can start attacking each other from your confusion, which is better than just taking away their returns, right? They're now fighting or helping you by fighting each other. They automatically don't get bonus actions and reactions, which has its own kind of benefit. And another way that it's better than all of the third level control spells is that you don't break this by hitting them. They do get a resave at the end of their turns, but you can just keep whacking on them and they're going to be still confused, right? Whereas hypnotic pattern and insight greed both immediately end if you damage them. So that's the upside here. Watery Sphere is another great one. I think that's from Elemental Evil, but it's an expanded content, WotC expanded content spell, and it's fantastic. All right, what it does is it creates this 5-foot radius sphere of water, and it's kind of like Bigby's hand, but stronger than Bigby's hand as a control effect. Bigby's hand is like more flexible, but this is a stronger control effect because you can just, as long as you're concentrating on that, it doesn't just appear in one place. You can run it around the battlefield, and it can just be scooping people up. And then once it scoops them up, if they fail that save, they are restrained inside of it, and they can try to break out by making strength saves to get out, but they have to spend their turn trying to make these saves to get out of it. They don't get auto. I guess they do get a resave. Sorry, they do get a resave at like the end of their turn, but they're still restrained. And even if they get out, you can just scoop them up again. Just keep scooping them up for a whole minute. Run that thing around, just picking people up. It has a limit on how many things it can hold. I think it's like 4 medium-sized creatures and 1 large-sized creature. But depending on the size, that's quite an effective thing to do on the battlefield, especially because if they save against it, you can just hit them again with it next turn. Now, it takes your action to move it around some more, but once you have 4 creatures scooped up, you just leave it there and then start doing your secondary, control spells or damage spells or whatever you like. Maelstrom, druid-only spell. This one's quite strong. It creates basically a whirlpool effect, but you don't have to have water already, which is what I assumed for a long time, and so I didn't use the spell. But I had a friend, one of my players, use it, and I was like, wow, that's awesome, because it creates the water. So you have this giant 30-foot radius cylinder, so 60-foot diameter area of 5 feet deep water, and it creates this whirlpool effect. And even if they succeed at their save, it's difficult terrain. If they fail at their save, it pulls them towards the center and deals them damage, right? And as long as they keep failing, it keeps pulling them. And as long as they're in the area and it's difficult terrain and 60 feet across, so it's hard to get out of. So they may save once, but they failed the next turn, they're going to get pulled right back. And a lot of the times they have 30 feet of movement speed, right? So if you 30 feet of movement speed with difficult terrain is 15 feet of movement. So they move 15 feet towards the edge if they succeed at their save. If they fail their save, they're pulled into the center 10 feet, which is basically took away almost all of the progress they made on their last turn. If they fail 2 saves in a row, they've lost all their progress and are now stuck in the center. So it's actually a pretty good control effect. It also does some damage, which is great. they take that damage every time they fail to save. So it's just they're just sucking them in, holding them in there, difficult terrain, and dealing more and more damage. It's like spike growth on steroids. It's a great spell. Next up, we got Wall of Force, and a lot of people talk about this one. You just there's no save against it. You just as long as they fit inside of it, they're encased in it, and they can't do anything. Now there is, depending on some DM interpretations of how you interpret the clause in that spell that says nothing can physically pass through it. So if you cast, which means a DM could interpret it as saying, if you cast a non-physical spell, something like Tasha's Mind Whip, that might be able to pass through it, right? Can you cast a healing word through it? It seems like you should be able to, because you can just see the target, right? Nothing's passing through, but like a fireball definitely describes it as something traveling. Lightning bolt, same thing, something traveling. Vitriolic sphere, something travels. So as long as something physically travels, it's blocked by this spell. If they are, if their only ranged attack is like arrows and spears, those cannot pass through. So it's a solid control effect, right? No save. Wall of Stone, this one has a save, but only if it would completely entrap them within the wall of stone you're creating, or against another wall, which is strange that this one has that deck save so they can like jump out of it before the wall takes effect. But the Wall of Force does not have that. So Wall of Force is better in a lot of ways than Wall of Stone. The way that Wall of Stone is better is it blocks line of sight. So it doesn't matter what they can do. If they can't see, nothing can pass through it physically, and if they can't see through it, that pretty much prevents everything. So depending on the situation, Wall of Stone might actually be better. Wall of Stone also has this interesting like clause that says if you concentrate on it for the whole 10 minutes, I think that's right. Yeah, 10 minutes. Um, it seems like it was an hour. Maybe I wrote that down wrong. If you concentrate it for the whole duration, the wall becomes permanent. So if you want to like build a castle, Wall of Stone, just cast it over and over until you have the whole structure that you want. All right, and last in this category is Mass Suggestion, which is a great one. It's the same thing as a suggestion spell, except it targets 12 creatures. Otherwise, it's identical. It does break if you damage them in any way, but it will last 8 hours. And then if you upcast it, its duration increases to like 10 days at 7th level and goes up to like 1 year at 9th level. So I don't know how often you're going to want to like take a creature out of the game for a year versus just 8 hours. Most of the time you like remove them from the battlefield till you finish killing everything else, then you run that one down and kill them. Like most of the time the 8 hours is more than sufficient. But there you go. That one does require the charmed condition, just like the second level suggestion spell. So if they're immune to charm, they're going to be immune to this, and that's the downside there. So you can kind of see where you're going to want to have a mix of these spells, right? Depending on the situation, depending on the battlefield layout, depending on what kind of creatures they are, you may want to use different spells. All right, got to go off camera again so that I can fit all of this on here. All right, 7th through 9th level concentration spells. There's only a few of them that are in this category. We got Force Cage. It's a lot like Wall of Force, but stronger. And they can't teleport through it, so they don't get any save to encase them. That charisma save is only applied if they attempt to teleport through it, and then they make a charisma save, and only if they succeed in the save can they teleport through it. So that one's kind of got a sneaky backup there, which Wall of Force allows them to teleport. It doesn't block teleports in any way, but Force Cage does. Okay, then you got Reverse Gravity. I mean, that's a great one. You might just be doing a bunch of damage, or if there's like a cavern above you, 100 feet up, then they're going to slam into the ceiling. Then you turn the spell off, they're going to slam into the ground. They're going to take 20 d6 damage. And you don't have to end it right away. You can just like slam them up there, finish the other creatures that weren't in the area of effect, and then when those are all gone, then you stop concentrating on reverse gravity, let them all drop to the ground, taking more damage, landing prone, and then you take those guys out. And it's got quite a wide area. 50-foot radius cylinder is pretty huge. And they've got notice there's an asterisk on the deck save there. They only get a deck save if they are adjacent or within reach of something fixed to the ground. So like a tree or chains, bolted to the wall or something like that. If it's just furniture, the furniture is going to fall with them. So they actually almost rare, it's pretty rare that they're going to have any deck save at all. Okay. Like they have to be standing next to something, and a lot of things don't qualify. If you're in a forest, there's a lot of things that qualify. Other than that, there's not a lot of things that are going to qualify. You're standing next to a stalactite that maybe you grab, okay? And then only then do they get to attempt the deck save. And even if they succeed on that deck save, they're still basically hanging from the ceiling by holding that thing. Like they've grabbed that thing, they've got to be using at least one hand, which means if they've got a shield, they had to drop their weapon to grab, because you can't drop your shield, right? It takes a whole action to remove your shield. So you can only drop a weapon and hold on to the whatever the thing is, the fixed thing that you're holding, and then you're dangling by that with no weapon, and you got your shield in your other hand or whatever your other hand is potentially available for. So you're still, even if you succeeded that deck save, still heavily constrained, right? Really impeded on what their options are. Now, if they can fly, now it's a different game. But as long as they don't fly, this is a strong control effect that is almost guaranteed to land on anything. Then you have whirlwind, which is like a maelstrom, but now it's with air, right? So you create this whirlwind, and it does a very similar thing. If creatures get into its area, they have to make these saves, a deck save to avoid getting into the area. Once they're in the area and start their turn there, they have to make a strength save or they're restrained, and they get moved up the whirlwind. The first time they fail their deck save, they take 10d6 bludgeoning damage, which is a lot. I mean, it's a decent amount. Now, if they succeed at their strength save, they can actually get out of the whirlwind, but they're hurled, 10d6 feet in like a random direction, which could cause damage as they fall, as they hit a wall. And then if you have push effects, you can like just push them back into the whirlwind again, and then they're going to take that damage again and start getting controlled again. So that's a pretty decent one. That one kind of depends a little bit more on. It's going to work a lot better because its area isn't nearly as big as Maelstrom. It's only a 10-foot radius cylinder, so it's going to work a lot better if you've got push and pull effects, and not just you, but the rest of the party. Like if you got a warlock in the party, this one's going to be a lot better. Like a warlock with repelling blast, just push him back in there. All right, then we got the maze spell at level 8. This is a single target, but there's no save. It just works. They're just gone. That's it. And that's the best thing. Like even if they have legendary resistance, it doesn't matter. They're just gone. Just gone. And they're stuck in this maze, and the only thing they can do is attempt to make intelligence investigation ability checks to attempt to figure out how to get out of the maze. And it's made against your spell save DC. And at level with an 8th level spell, your spell save DC is like 19, 20, maybe higher. So it's good. If you just really need to remove one thing from the battlefield, maze, gone. Then we got Mass Polymorph at 9th level, which just turns a bunch of creatures into beasts, and they could be your allies and or enemies. Maybe you have like several allies who are almost dead. Well, turn them all into like Tyrannosaurus Rexes or giant apes. And then you have 5 enemies, and because this can hit 10 creatures total, and you have 5 enemies who are like really strong on the battlefield. Turn them all into killer whales, which is nice. Like that's better than squirrels, by the way, because like a killer whale has a lot of hit points but has only a swim speed. So if it's on the land, it can't move, and it doesn't have any ranged attacks. You just do that to them; they can't move around. But also, they can't be unpolymorphed by simply just hitting them, right? Like if you turn them into squirrels with 1 hit point, then their allies can just bop them for like 1 damage and unpolymorph them, right? But if you make them a killer whale, it has a lot of hit points, but no movement speed on land, so they can't just be bopped to unpolymorph them, and they can't do anything because they can't move. And we're going to finish this off with what I'm going to call special opener spells. They're 8th and 9th level, and when you're casting a spell with that high of a spell slot, that's not a follow up to some sort of other concentration spell. This is what you're going to open up combat with. And sympathy is starting off with yet being another exception to what I just said, which is you notice it has a 10-day duration. Okay, you don't cast this during combat. What you do is you cast this on like a rock or a pebble or something like that. You choose the creatures it's going to affect. You can only choose one kind of creature, and it's not very specific on what one kind means. I wish they were a little more specific with these kind of things. And then you also choose whether you're going to cause the antipathy effect or sympathy effect. The antipathy effect causes the frightened condition, and sympathy causes the charmed condition. So what you would do is you would choose the kind of creature that you think you're likely to run into either tomorrow or the next 10 days, cast that on this thing and decide, do you want them to be running away from you, or do you want them to have to like move closer to you for some reason? And then you put that effect on this thing. It doesn't take concentration. Then you just walk around with it. So you're going to go invade like an orc lair. I don't know why you're doing that 15th level. But let's say that's what you're doing. You cast it on this, say you want orcs to run away, and now you just walk into their lair, and they still get a saving throw when the object comes within 120 feet of them. So a lot of the time they're going to fail and be frightened and have to run away, and sometimes they're not going to. So you take those ones out first, and then you hunt down the ones that are frightened. It's an easy way to just take out an entire tribe, I guess. We're if you're into war crimes, I guess. Yeah, so that's a strange spell. So no concentration, and you cast it the like day before, not day of. Then we got Prismatic Wall and Psychic Scream. But again, both of these not concentration, but these are openers. Okay, Prismatic Wall creates a wall effect. You can designate your allies to just be immune to it, and if you're fighting, this is like the big BBEG fight. You can either put this around yourselves if it's a huge open area. You just put this as a sphere around yourselves, and then nobody can reach you. They can't see you, and if they try to reach through it, they're affected by all 7 layers, which would be like 60 d6 elemental damage, plus the blinded condition, plus the restrained condition, plus the petrified condition. I mean, it just wrecks them. And that's every time they reach through it. And then your allies can just step out on their turns, do their thing, fight, shoot, stab them, cast a spell, and then step back in at the end of their turn. And just like basically just ends the combat. It's over, right? If you're not in like a really big open area and the BBEG and their bad guys are like on one side of a cavern, you just put this in the middle of the cavern, block them all off so they're stuck on that side, and then you just step through it and again do the same thing, just like take them out. It's basically the combat's over once you cast this. Like there's no way they're going to take down the wall. And then Psychic Scream. This one's also a great opener. You just choose 10 creatures within range, which is 90 feet in any direction, and it lasts indefinitely, and they have to make an intelligence saving throw. If they fail it, they are stunned, and there's no duration on that stun. They just keep making saving throws until they succeed. But if your spell save DC is like 21 and they don't at least have a +1 on their intelligence saves, then they will never save against this. They are permanently stunned. Just game over. That's it. And contrary to what I think some people think, a nat 20 on a save is not a save. Nat 20s and nat 1s only affect attack rolls, not saving throws, not ability checks. So nothing will get them out of it if they don't have at least a modifier high enough to meet your DC. So yeah, that one's great too, and it also does a big chunk of damage, which not nearly as much as Prismatic Wall, but like Prismatic Wall, it only deals damage if they try to reach through it. Psychic Scream, you just hit them wherever they are, 90 feet away. So just a great way to take out a boatload of like minions who are probably not very smart, right? Like it's just classic that minions aren't very smart. Intelligence saves are better ones to target. So great spells. This is a great spell. All right, we're getting close to finishing this up. So now we have what I would call follow-up spells, okay? And these are non-concentration spells, so you can use them in tandem with a concentration effect. You put your one big concentration spell up, then you start using these, and that's only if you need more control effects. If the party needs more control happening on the battlefield, then you keep following up with these, right? And what does that mean, right? How do you decide if you need more? It really comes down to how many enemies are not controlled by your concentration effect, and how your allies are doing, right? If your allies are already really hurt and struggling, you might want to keep locking down enemies, crippling all of them, okay? Cripple every one of them that succeeded at its save against your big control effect. But if your allies are like fresh and doing fine, then that's fine. Maybe you don't do any more control effects, and you said switch to damage, helping them just take out the guys who saved against your big control spell. All right, so yeah, that you have to decide for that. It's on a situation by situation basis. But you got at level 1 the command spell. Okay, this one's great. It takes away their whole action. Casting it at level 1 is not very great because you're trading your action for their turn, and if they save, then you wasted yours for nothing. But if you're going to use it, like let's say there's 3 or 4 monsters who saved against your big control effect, cast this at upcast this and use it on all of them, and you'll probably hit 2 or 3, maybe all of them, but some of them for sure, or likely, not for sure. So that's a great follow-up spell. Tasha's Mind Whip, also a great follow-up spell, especially if they're far away and they don't have a good ranged attack. Okay. The big benefit of this one is they have to choose between movement and action, so that's pretty good. If they have to like move to reach your frontliners, right? And this is one where you'd want to tell your frontliners, hey, don't end your turns next to them. Make them walk to you, and then they can't attack you. It also can make them choose between like their action and bonus action, but most monsters do not have a bonus action, and even the ones that do, their bonus action is not particularly strong. So that's a minor effect. And then moving up to level 3, you got plant growth. Now this is just a movement impediment spell, but it makes their movement cost 4 times as much. It's not the same as difficult terrain, so this stacks with difficult terrain. So it makes their movement cost 4 times as much. They need 20 feet of movement to go 1 square, right? Because 4 times. If you hit them with difficult terrain on top of this, now they need 40 feet of movement to go 1 square. And most monsters do not have 40 feet of movement. So this one's great. It does require that there be like some kind of plants in the area. If I were the DM, and when I am DMing, I suggest being really liberal with this, right? If they're underground, let it work on moss, right? Moss roots and mushroom things and mycelium, things like that. Be kind of generous. Don't require that they always be in a forest for this to work, okay? Otherwise, it's going to be too restrictive. And the druid, who probably is the one doing this, is just going to feel like they're not having fun with their big control spell. And this is the first real good control spell that druids get. Then you've got Silunes, I think is how you say it, Viper, which is an interesting one. It doesn't take concentration. It is a self buff. So you buff yourself with this effect, and then you start using your magic action to try to make an attack roll, a range attack roll against a creature. If it hits, they're poisoned. And if they're poisoned, they're also incapacitated for 1 round. So quite a strong control effect. It does a little bit of damage. Damage is not the reason you cast this. It's generally going to do less damage than just your cantrips. So don't worry about damage. It's just about that control effect. Now, the other nice, interesting thing about it is that this also gives you temporary hit points, and it's a bonus action to cast. So you bonus action cast it on yourselves. If you're desperate for temporary hit points, you don't want to lose your action, you can cast this on yourself as a bonus action to get some temporary hit points. And upcasting does increase the temporary hit points. So that's interesting. So it's got these weird kind of secondary effects, but the main reason you're doing this is a action you can take to potentially cause the incapacitated condition round after round after round after round without using your concentration. So you can concentrate on like the web spell and then be hitting people with this, preventing them from getting out of the web spell or hitting the ones that already got out of the web spell. It's quite strong, and druids get access to it. Then moving up to 5th level, you got Synaptic Static. That debuff is just so strong. They have to subtract a 1d6 from every attack roll, every ability check, and their Constitution saving throws to maintain concentration. So it's not every saving throw. It's just those related to maintaining your concentration. But still, that's a really strong debuff. It lasts 1 minute, no concentration. You can potentially just hit them again and again with this. And it also does a decent chunk of damage, same as Fireball. So that's a good one. Transmute Rock. This is another, it can do damage if you do it on the ceiling and it falls on them. But if you're not inside, then you can't do that. But it's still worthwhile to do it because it creates an effect that requires them to spend, again, just like plant growth, 4 times their movement speed to move 1 square. So if you hit them with both plant growth and transmute rock, it's now 16. They need 16 feet of movement to move 1 foot. So is that 80 feet for 1 5-foot square? Basically, they can't move. They're just stuck there now if you hit them with both of these. And they stack. Yeah, and both of them stack with difficult terrain. So, movement slowing effects aren't super strong until you stack them and then reduce their movement to 0. And then it's super strong. Then level 6, Bones of the Earth. Very cool name spell. It creates pillars of rock, not concentration. So this is like creating your own wall of stone without using your concentration. And if you have it rise up under the creatures and there's a ceiling, you can have it slam them against the ceiling, dealing 66 bludgeoning damage and pinning them, making them restrained. And then everyone on the other side, if you're like in a tunnel or a cavern and there's like, you can totally section it off, then you just trap the enemies on the other half. You trap maybe some on your side so you can mop them up, and then the ones in the middle are slammed against the ceiling. No concentration. That's a good one. And then Scatter. This one is like a special use one where maybe you need to reposition some of your allies or yourself and the enemies. You can do that. This moves up to 5 creatures. You teleport them to anywhere within range. Solid spell. You don't necessarily want to use this. This isn't necessarily a follow-up spell that you just use every round just because, right? Because it's not always advantageous to move yourself and your allies around. Sometimes it is, often it is, but not always. Especially this is a 6th level spell slot. So Selûne's Viper is more the type of thing where, yeah, you're just going to use that. Like that's a great one to just use if you don't have a better idea. Scatter is the one where you use where clearly one of your allies is in trouble, and you got some sort of like I don't know, transmute rock or plant growth effect going on over here, and the allies got out of it. So you can use scatter to get your ally out of trouble and send the enemies back into the control effects. Honorable mention spells. I am not going to go over all these because this video has already gotten too long. But yeah, you got some great options here. Bane is great for like teamwork. You got several slowing effects here, which is good to stack, like I've mentioned. You've also got different things that can knock things prone, especially good against flying creatures. You got things like the heat metal spell, which there is a saving throw, but the saving throw is whether or not they can keep holding their weapon. But if you cast it on their armor, they cannot. There's nothing they can do about it, and they're going to have the disadvantage and take the damage every single round. So there's some great options. Hold person is great. It only works on humanoids, which is probably the biggest downside, but it does upcast well, just like command or Tasha's Hideous Laughter, but it has a duration, and you can just hit them and it won't break, right? So unlike Tasha's Hideous Laughter, hitting somebody who's under hold person doesn't break. In fact, you have advantage to hit them because they're paralyzed, and if you hit them within 5 feet, it's an auto crit. So that's a pretty good one if they're humanoids. Uh, Erupting Earth is a one I want to call out. I don't think I've ever seen a player cast Erupting Earth because it's got like a measly 3d10, 3d12 actually I think damage, which is not very good, and it's third level just like Fireball, but it causes difficult terrain indefinitely in that area. Like it's indefinite until somebody spends like a bunch of like 1 minute per 5 foot square to clean it up, which is not going to happen during combat, right? So as far as the combat's concerned, this is indefinite, causes indefinite difficult terrain there, and it's not concentration. So you'd be casting it in different places, causing difficult terrain all over the places where you want it, and stack that with like transmute rock or stack that with plant growth, right? Just really lock things down in the places where you want to lock it down. The dominate spells are not great in the sense that it's only one creature always, and it's limited on the creature type. The big upside of those is that it doesn't just take one creature out of the fight; it turns one creature to your side, which sometimes can be the right thing to do. Um, then you've got the Dirge spell, which I love, but the damage isn't super strong. The area is huge, and it's got that basically slowing effect where it cuts their speed in half. And if you circle cast it, then it's S tier because now you're causing exhaustion, and every level of exhaustion gives them a penalty on their next saving throw, which means they're more likely to fail their save against the next save of Dirge. So that one's just crippling. Then you've got things like Earthquake and Tsunami, which are actually quite strong spells. They're just super complicated and hard to execute on a battle map. Like it's hard to make all the little, because you got to like manipulate the battle map and move things around. So those are actually complex spells that are hard to use, is the way I would put it. Hard to use, but they're strong. It's not a power issue. All right, let's wrap this up with some considerations, right? Final thoughts. First off, the number one trap that I see every player fall into with control spells is they try to take them all, right? You fill up your whole spell list with these control spells, and you can only, the vast majority of them are concentration spells. You can only concentrate on one spell at a time. So there's no point in having 10 concentration spells, right? What you want to do is have a mix, right? Most of them have wisdom saving throws. So you're going to have one or two with the wisdom saving throw. Definitely try to get one with a dex save, get one with an int save if you can, intelligence saving throw. Different options, maybe some that don't cause saving throws at all, like plant growth and transmute rock, where they just don't get a save against it. And then you still lock them down. So you want a mix of things. You also want a mix of sizes and shapes and areas, and also, and mix in ones where there is no kind of real size. It's just pick targets like Slow and Tasha's Hideous Laughter, and spells like that, where you just pick the targets, right? You want a mix of all of these things because it's pretty rare that one of these spells, or virtually you can guarantee that you're never going to have one spell that's always going to be the best thing and work really, really well in every situation, right? Like Hypnotic Pattern is great in some situations, and in other situations it's terrible. Okay. Also be cognizant of don't just pick a bunch of control spells that all rely on the charmed condition, because some monsters are immune, right? Don't pick a bunch of spells that are all reliant on the frightened condition, because some monsters are immune. So pick some that are not reliant on any conditions, and then maybe one that relies on the charm condition and one that relies on the frightened condition, right? Something like that. You want to mix it up. I would not do more than 5 or 6 control spells, right? You want to have some at low levels, some at medium levels, maybe one really, really high level control spell, the highest level spell slot you have. You want to mix. 5 or 6 is probably the right number of concentration control spells. Then get 1 or 2 non-concentration control spells, so you can do that if needed. But make sure you But once you've got that, make sure you have other options, right? You want versatility options. You want, knowledge gaining spells. You want damage and attacking spells. You want support spells if you can get them. You want other options. And then generally, the way you'd want to do it is start with a big opener, which will either be a concentration spell or one of those big openers that I mentioned, the 8th and 9th level spells. Like those are your big openers that you start the fight, which if they work will end the fight also. And then you follow up with either some, the non-concentration controller spells, or you just deal damage or do something else useful in the combat, right? If you got some sort of support or healing capabilities, then do those things. And that's how you be an awesome controller. Yeah. Again, the biggest trap, make sure you don't fill up your entire spell list with control spells, because you can only cast one concentration spell at a time. And all right, thanks for watching. Hope it was worth. You found it valuable, and yeah, be cool to each other when you're playing D&D, because it's a game. It's for fun, right? That is the point of it. These people are either your friends or potential friends, right? Don't be a jerk. Okay, catch you next time.